What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Transformers Rise of the Beasts, the seventh live-action Transformers film. First since Bumblebee in 2018. Second, not directed by Michael Bay. And yeah, I think this was an interesting moment for a Transformers movie to come out with this franchise. Notably, Bumblebee, coming out several years ago at this point, was a step in a new direction for the Transformers franchise. Smaller stakes story, more grounded, more human-centric regarding Haley Steinfeld's character, smaller budget when it comes to the production of the movie. And that's a film that, although it grossed less than the Bay movies, it actually was a financial success because it cost less as well. That being said, they quickly announced that they were going to make a bigger Transformers movie once again, and quickly we learned that it was going to be a Beast Wars adaptation. Beast Wars, of course, the kind of cult hit animated Transformers series from the 90s, and an injection of, I think, life into this franchise that has, I think, felt long in the tooth to many towards the end of the Bay run. I liked Bumblebee a lot. I thought it was honestly like pretty solid, like genre storytelling and like perhaps like the highs you can achieve are like dramatic stakes when it comes to a movie about, transforming alien robots after all. Now, I don't have any like affinity for Beast Wars. A lot of people do. In general, I don't have like a huge affinity for Transformers. I enjoyed the films growing up as a kid. Like me and my brother, enjoyed them when they came out, but I don't think about the franchise like all that much, but obviously I was happy to see Rise of the Beast, check it out, see what it's like, and I would say, kind of unsurprisingly, it's not the best Transformers movie, and it's not the worst one. It's solid. There's things I liked and things I didn't like about it. Let's just get into that. So this is directed by Stephen Caple Jr., who did Creed 2, and I think something that stands out quite quickly is that you did a big, large-scale Transformers movie again, but you didn't do it with Michael Bay. Now that means there's some things that are good, right? I think the plot makes a bit more sense. Not that it makes a lot of sense, but it makes more sense than some of the Bay stuff. There's less leering female camera work, gratuitous shots of the female anatomy that we expected from Michael Bay back then, of course. But one thing you can always count on with Michael Bay is that man knows how to shoot action. Watch Ambulance last year. Amazing action movie because of Bay's camera work, really. And I think just the action, the watching the Transformers do their thing, which is really the main attraction when you make the big scale Transformers movies, is just not quite as compelling as it is under Caple's eye than it was with Bay. That's probably to be expected, but I think of probably like the peak of like Transformers action to me would be in Revenge of the Fallen, which is not a good film overall, but like that forest fight scene where Megatron and the Decepticons kill Optimus Prime, that was like some badass shit and it looked really cool. And, contrast that with like the end of Rise of the Beasts. It's like super gray. You get the gray bad guys, gray bad Transformers on this gray field. It's all grayscale. This doesn't engage you. I think one thing that's nice this time around is that like the character designs make the Transformers stand out a bit more. I think that was a big criticism of the Bay films, is that a lot of the Decepticons looked very similar. They're often quite silvery, and it's hard to tell who was who unless they had something obvious that differentiated them, like Starscream looking like a triangle or Megatron being Megatron. Like otherwise, it's kind of generic. And I think a lot of the characters are less generic looking this time around, but the bad guys, like the cannon fodder, don't alleviate that problem. And that was a big sigh I had in the third act, which is like watching, yep, here comes the big, onslaught of never-ending anonymous bad guys to slaughter. And it's like, doesn't really compel you too much. Now, I think what Rise of the Beast obviously tries to give you a different dynamic with the Maximals. And Optimus Primal, the gorilla Transformer voiced by Ron Perlman. The leader, Michelle Yeoh as the voice of a Falcon Transformer. And they're supposed to be like a different dynamic. And we don't really get enough time with the Maximals to have like a big impression from them, get a big impression from them. And I'd also say like this is like a weak Optimus Prime movie, if such a thing exists. Like I love Peter Cullen's voice work throughout the franchise. He Optimus sounds cool and badass, but like Optimus Prime in Rise of the Beast is kind of a wet blanket as a character. He already was kind of a generic uh, action figure type character anyway. There wasn't a whole lot under the hood with Optimus Prime, but he felt particularly like I don't know, kind of dull this time around. I wasn't super invested with him. Honestly, I think the best aspect of like the Transformers side of things, where I thought Michelle Yeoh was like pretty solid for what she was given to do. But my favorite thing about this was honestly the main villain, which would be Scourge, voiced by Peter Dinklage, who's the leader of the Terracons who are serving Unicron. Unicron is like front and center in this movie. I think Rise of the Beasts, to its credit, takes like the Transformers lore, which is so ridiculous and so absurd. It takes it seriously and just goes in and, you know, if you want to see a faithful adaptation of this bonkers ass storytelling that is Transformers, this is what you're gonna get. And part of that is Unicron, this gargantuan planet swallowing Galactus esque villain, voiced by Coleman Domingo this time around. And Scourge as his like liaison on the ground, actually pretty badass. He has a cool look to him with like the like devil mask he's got. Pretty badass when he kills one of the Maximals in the prologue. Yeah, I thought he was pretty fun. And of course, the other interface with this would be the human characters. Notably, it's like pretty svelte, pretty slight. But you have Anthony Ramos' character and Dominique Fishback's character, both grounded in, based in New York City. Fishback plays a museum, like archaeology intern, and Ramos plays a like computer whiz trying to get a job to support his family. He has a sick younger brother, hardworking single mom, it seems. And I think they both gave pretty good performances. Honestly, like awesome look for Dominique Fishback, who was amazing in The Deuce, amazing in Judas and the Black Messiah. Got a lot of love for Swarm on Amazon earlier this year. Great look for her. I think she deserves it. And she does a pretty good job for what she's, you know, given to do. And Ramos has, I think, genuine star power. People know him, Hamilton, In the Heights. He's got a lot of stuff coming up. I like Anthony Ramos a lot. I think he's just really charismatic. They both struggle to act with the Transformers characters they interact with, but it's no surprise. It's, you know, complete green screen work. Like, it's challenging. I don't know how much better you can do with that, but I think because like both those characters are given like somewhat of like a human like connection to like their own lives, you know, with like Ramos's character's family in the very beginning, like they actually they do feel like real characters and like they do drive a lot of the plot, which I liked. Like it felt like slightly more grounded for a Transformers movie that was still pretty big. And I think if the third act, I think, just looked a little better, like the action like really delivered at the end, I think this would have been towards the top of my Transformers rankings, if you will. I just think like it never really had like a standout like wow moment, nor did it have anything that like was like a god awful moment either. You know, it's like just a kind of a solid Transformers movie. I think if we could have punched this action up a little bit more, it would have been cool. I think the CGI itself, like I mentioned the grayscale stuff, but the CGI itself is pretty good. And like obviously you need to spend a lot to make it look pretty good. Obviously this is CGI heavy. People know. Yeah. So like overall, it's a solid film as far as the Transformers standard goes. Albeit it's a low bar. I think people all know that at this point. But it kind of gives you what you want from it if that's what you're seeking. So, don't expect a reinvention. I think that's kind of obvious. Now, at the very end, spoilers, but like at the very end, there's kind of this outro scene, or actually no, it's a mid-credit scene, like right after the credits start, and Ramos is actually going to get a job this time, and he encounters Michael Kelly, and I'm like, huh, interesting. You have like a real like legit actor in this like cameo role. What is it? Tellman, like you quickly learn that this like group, they understand what Ramos was up to, the Transformers. He denies it. Saving the world, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, it's just like a Sector 7 introduction, because I should have mentioned, Rise of the Beast takes place in the early 90s. Bumblebee took place in the late 80s. They're both prequels to the other Transformers movies. And it's like, oh, is this like a Sector 7 nod? Shout out John Turturro. No, Michael Kelly actually is representative of, spoilers, G.I. Joe. Of course, G.I. Joe, like Transformers, a Hasbro franchise, they are setting up a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover in earnest, it seems. They had previously announced that, Paramount had previously announced that Rise of the Beast would be the first of, a new trilogy, or at least instead of 3 new movies about Transformers. And there's animated series in development as well. Now, if we think about G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes, I actually thought was, not half bad, but really bombed at the end of 2021. Shout out Henry Golding. G.I. Joe franchise seems pretty inert these days. Transformers, which has always been a bigger success at the box office from its heyday even to now, perhaps it's a way to resurrect G.I. Joe in a certain sense for Hasbro, for E1, for Paramount. These rights are actually being sold in a certain sense right now, so more to come here. But kind of interesting. I honestly didn't expect it. It doesn't necessarily get me super excited. I think G.I. Joe is what it is at this point, but could be kind of cool and maybe actually ambitious. We'll see. Also, because this movie Rise of the Beast was set in the 90s, unexpectedly awesome soundtrack just because it's set in New York. Unsurprisingly, very 90s hip hop heavy, and they actually get really good needle drops. You get Rakim and Wu-Tang and Biggie. They play some classics, which I appreciated. But yeah, that's Rise of the Beasts. I think the box office will be very interesting to analyze as well. It's actually looking like it'll be a decent start the opening weekend domestically, decent start in China, but I have a hard time not seeing Rise of the Beast kind of getting swallowed up by Across the Spider-Verse and being one of the films that gets kind of beaten down in a stacked, release calendar. Little Mermaid's doing pretty strong in the U.S. and Guardians still kicking there. Kind of reminds me of how Dungeons and Dragons kind of got swallowed up in a really busy March. We'll see, because I think they would like this movie to do pretty decent given the franchise plans they have, but they are expensive. So if it doesn't do much better than Bumblebee, then you can probably kiss the crossover universe goodbye. But it's tracking pretty well so far, so we'll see how it holds as the summer continues. So that's something to watch. But let me know, how did you like Transformers Rise of the Beast? Were you a hardcore Transformers head? I am not, but were you really excited to see the Beast Wars stuff? If so, let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.